How do we as parents help our kids draw lines? And how do we as women set standards up for ourselves when maybe even in our own heads it seems a little crazy or aggressive sometimes? I'm Kristen with Healthy Buffalo. Stay tuned for this next video on body autonomy. Grade. I lived in a small town in Oklahoma, and I was in a civics class, so I would have been about 13, and it was a heavily female class, and there's 3 boys in the whole thing, and we would all sit around, and we would be hunched over doing our work, and we would be taking a test or something, and the teacher, he would walk in between all the rows, and he would massage our shoulders, only the females. We would all sit around after class and we would joke about it, and it clearly, we were all uncomfortable and nobody wanted it to happen. The whole time you'd be like, and you would very clearly have body language when he did it where you would be like, but none of us felt that we could say anything about it. In fact, actually, I wouldn't even go that far. I would say none of us felt that it was even an option to say anything or that we should say anything. And even if we did, what would we say? Were any of us brave enough? I know I wasn't. The thing about that teacher is he wasn't a mean guy. He actually was someone that you wanted to make happy. Actually, I think he lived in my neighborhood, and I would ride my bike, and I probably saw him once or twice, and I waved at him. And I mean, you wouldn't want to be like, no, I don't like what you're doing. At that time, you didn't even think you should. And also, he was in charge of your grade, so he was an authoritative figure in my life. For me, that was the first time that I had ever been uncomfortable in my own body. And tragically for my daughters who grew up in the foster care system, some of them, it happened a lot sooner for them. When I was teaching karate, I had a mom bring in her 14-year-old daughter, and this girl would go to family functions, and there was a step-grandfather. She was the stepmom, so this 14-year-old girl would be going to the other side of the family's family functions, and the step-grandpa on that side, if you follow me, would come around and he would touch her in ways that she didn't like. And it would be out in the open. Everybody would be having fun. He'd just come by and like trail his hands or something. And she had obviously talked about it with her stepmom, but she was a very shy girl. So she had come to me with this issue, and we had talked about having a dialogue. Having a dialogue can be just important in training as the physical aspect of it, especially at the very beginning. We have to be able to set standards to draw a line for ourselves, and that line has to be if uncomfortable touch. If someone is touching you and they are in your space and you don't like it, you aren't in the wrong. If you don't practice this, the same as you don't practice anything else, if you don't train for this, then you're less likely to pull it off. Therefore, having exactly the words that you're going to say, saying them in the mirror consistently over and over of how you're going to say this is very, very important. One of my favorite lines that I usually say a lot that stems into holiday issues, as well as when you get into possibly managing an unknown contact that could lead to a physical altercation, is stop, you're making me uncomfortable. Women tend to ignore their baser gut instinct in lieu of being polite, and to ignore these warning signs in their brain that danger is coming. And even to the point to where they don't even know, oh, I am uncomfortable, like in 8th grade, but I don't even feel like I have the right to say anything. I've had it where I've been in a public setting, like a wedding, and I had told this guy, hey, I'm married and I have 9 children, which should be like one of the biggest deterrents. And he still got friendly enough where he went like this to me, and I knocked his hand off, but not even in a sort of way. It was knocked his hand off, and I was like, and he immediately went, oh, you're one of those girls. You are not the one in the wrong because you don't want someone to touch you. You are not the crazy person. And they will make you feel that way, and you will feel that way. As soon as he said that to me, I was automatically thinking, oh gosh, was I a bit too aggressive with that guy? And that's not it. You are not being too aggressive. You literally do not want this person in your space, and he does not have the right to be there in the first place. Ironically, in the polite spectrum, women also tend to keep ourselves in situations that we could have exited in the first place due to being polite. I remember being in college, and because a guy would buy me a beer, I would feel like I would have to sit and listen to his conversation. And sometimes the guy could buy you a beer and you'd have a really nice conversation. But it did seem more often than not that a guy would buy me a beer and the conversation would be rude. It would be sexist. Sometimes I would have to listen to these jokes. And I remember sitting there and I was very clearly uncomfortable and my body language was uncomfortable. And I would feel that I still had to sit there because he had bought me that drink. We also need to understand that just because someone bought you a drink does not mean you have to be in that position. If he's going to be rude, you are able to get up and leave. It's not a business transaction. He did not buy that beer to pay for your company. If that was the case, you would be an escort service. You are not an escort service. It's the same with dinner. If you were to go to dinner and he bought your dinner, that doesn't mean that later on you're pressured into having sex with him. That's prostitution. Again, not a transaction. I could even see like it probably is the smart thing to do is to not let a guy buy you a drink, especially if you're not seeing it being made in a bar. You are not crazy. It is not a business transaction. And you are not being rude by getting up and leaving an uncomfortable situation. It was literally, I think I was probably 23 or 24 before I'm sitting there and I'm having this conversation and this guy is just being super gross and just really crude. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, why am I sitting here? Why am I listening to this? And I grabbed my beer and I just left the table. I owed him no explanation whatsoever. It was his actions that caused my reaction. When you use your dialogue and you are practicing it so that it comes out more strong, when you're in that moment, your heart is a little bit faster. You're sitting here and you're questioning yourself and you're second guessing everything in your head and you're like, maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm being sensitive. That's a big one. Or maybe I'm just taking this a little bit more than what it should be. When you do say what you're going to say. So in my case, it'd be like, stop, you're making me uncomfortable. Understand that that puts them immediately on the defense. The reason that you practice this is so that when you say this and your heart rate is going or you're questioning yourself, that as soon as he puts his hand on there or as soon as he says an inappropriate thing, you can be like, stop, you're making me uncomfortable. Or what you're saying is inappropriate and your voice doesn't stutter, your voice doesn't shake, you're able to say it assertively. One of my mentors that I really like, he uses the phrase being assertive without being a bitch. I really like that phrase because that's exactly what you're going for. You're not going for rude. I don't want to be rude to these people. What I'm looking at is correcting a situation and removing myself. And so I would even go so far and extend on that to say, I want to be polite, but I want to be assertive. And so please understand that no matter what, they are going to make you feel like you're the crazy person, that you're in the wrong, that you're the one being overly sensitive. And that is not the case. I had a girl that took one of my self-defense seminars and I go over dialogue a lot. We go over practicing it. We go over how we space and how far we keep people away from us, especially managing unknown contacts. Thanks, Greg. She had wrote me a message on Facebook and she said that she really appreciated it because she was in a gas station over Halloween and she was dressed up and she was trying to get her stuff and there was a guy in front of her and then two men behind her and the guy in front of her was making super lewd comments about her costume. And she said, Kristen, I was thinking about it and I went over what you had said and I looked at the guy and I said, you are being very inappropriate. And I said it really loud. And she said the guy just was like, and the two guys behind her got really quiet. And he literally took his stuff and sat it on the counter and left without paying for anything because he'd been called out. She said I'm very grateful for this. She also was very cautious when she walked out to the parking lot. That was a very good instance of where dialogue stopped an issue and called him out on it because of practice, because of saying it, training it. She was able to pull it off and execute it perfectly. I remember being at the Joplin Mall and I was walking in and there was the front doors right here and there was these two teen girls, 16 or 17 maybe, and there was a guy that was probably in his 50s standing way too close to them. And you could tell he was a stranger to them. Their body language read that they were very uncomfortable, but they did not want to be rude and just basically say, I'm sorry, we can't help you. One of the things that I also think is really important for women to understand is that when you are out and about with dealing with strangers in the public, a man does not need to be asking you for help. We teach our kids this, we teach our children this. An adult is not going to ask you for help, stranger danger. I feel like women need to be following the same rule. Men don't need to be asking them for help. One of the ways that I deal with that is if someone is approaching me like I need this, I'm very much, I keep on my way. I'm sorry, I can't help you. And I keep walking. I mean, I'm still keeping an eye on him, making sure I'm not going to be ambushed from the back, but I'm very much like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And I keep going. At the Joplin Mall, they were standing by a curb. And so I stopped and I watched from a little bit. I didn't know if he was going to like throw them into a van or something like that, but they clearly felt they could not say anything. And so they were humoring him, but they were clearly uncomfortable. I waited until they had walked away from him and went to the door to make sure that they were safely in there. You could tell that they were discussing it and they were making the jokes to each other and trying to laugh it off. It wasn't funny. That's the thing. Just like my eighth grade story, it wasn't funny. We just used humor to overcome something that clearly made us uncomfortable. We can very much say, no, stop what you're doing. From my young girls all the way up to my older girls and my sisters, I very much want them to be like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. With my younger girls, I want them to be assertive. They know that no one needs to be in their space. No one needs to be touching them. And if they are in any sort of uncomfortable position, I don't care if it's a family member, a family friend, I don't care what it is, when they go, and if they are in, like, say, a holiday setting and someone touches them inappropriately, I want them to be able to be like, I don't like what you're doing. It does tend to, like the gas station incident, call attention to a situation. If that was my daughter, and as soon as I heard that, you can bet I'm probably over there going over and checking out what's going on. Again, it may not even be someone that understands. There are people that invade space, and maybe that's just the lesson that they need to learn, is that they shouldn't be, touching a 14-year-old girl. They shouldn't be doing these things because that is her space, that is her body. Sadly, there are family members out there that would tell the girl that she is being overly dramatic. And that is not the case. If you are a young girl, please understand that no one has the right to touch you if you do not want it. So being able to voice that out loud, that in that setting would usually stop it. Again, with the girls in the Joplin Mall, I would very much have liked them, especially if, my daughter would have been like 17 or 18 and a stranger came and approached them and was, asking them for something. I want them very much before he even gets within 10 or 15 feet to be like, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you, and just keep going. I would rather them be rude than hauled into a van, and I'm pretty sure every parent feels that way. Again, no man should be asking you for help in that regard. I was a really shy eighth grader, and so for me to do that, it would have been an incredibly brave thing. But I look back now and I'm like, man, if I would have done that, would it have stopped the inappropriate behavior of that teacher? And so that's also why I feel very strongly about what I'm doing as a foster parent. And to a lot of teen girls, there is that message of, I didn't know that I could say anything. I didn't even know this was an option. And I want them to go home and I want them to practice and I want them to set that standard up, that very first line of self-defense of, you don't get to do that. You don't get to touch me if I don't want you to. If you make me uncomfortable, you don't get to be in my bubble. This is a thing that's very near and dear to my heart as a foster parent, with a lot of teen girls, the ability to set a standard for yourself of, I don't want you to touch me. You don't get to touch me. You need to not be in my bubble. You don't need to be this way. And being able to say it in a strong manner, being able to practice it and being able to say it when your heart is going and when you're unsure of yourself and when you're kind of almost like waffling of whether or not, oh, maybe is this going to cause problems for my family? Is this going to cause problems for me later on? Being able to say it because you've practiced it is very important. Can have the outcome of that woman in the gas station where the guy just dropped his stuff and left. At the very least, it's going to call attention, especially if you're a young girl, for your parents or for someone to see that someone is being inappropriate. Please practice your dialogue. It is very important when you're in this position and you are scared. You need to be able to project what you're wanting to say in a very calm, clear, and strong manner. Thank you again for watching.